Hello, I'm Mike Lawrence, and I'd like to welcome you to Isleport Farm, the family home. The family have lived here since 1901. My grandfather there in front of the farmhouse itself was my grandmother, and the babe in the pram would be my father, so the date of that would be about 1903. The farmhouse has changed little, but there has been a farm here on this site since before 1414, but due to a number of floods, the last one being in the 1600s. The water was some 12 foot deep, so obviously the properties have had some damage over the years, and this house dates from 1747. Slightly later, my grandmother and some of the family on the triangle in front of the farmhouse. My father standing along the hedge line, he would be about 8, and his bicycle parked against the fence there, so it would be about 1911. So there's a bit of a family group there. As I said, the farmhouse is looking pretty well the same now today as it looks there in that photograph. I'm third generation at the farm. My grandfather was big into making cheese and butter at the farm. He had a dairy of shorthorn cattle, and also bought milk from the various farms, neighbouring farms. And the cheese was auctioned at Highbridge. They had a weekly cheese auction there. And it was one of the biggest cheese auctions in the country at that time, and the surplus milk was taken in 17-gallon churns to the railway station for onward journey to London. So we are putting on a hay and harvest working at the farm. Little over 30 acres now at the farm, so not big enough for farming. This was a machine that was built by Tom Heel. He started playing around with this idea in 1926. This was his demonstration machine in 1930. It's basically an old Morris commercial car, and he has built the tractor up, as we call it, using a Bamford horse-drawn mower underneath the chassis. So the engine drives the mower and the wheels, and he perfected this idea by 1930, went on to make a lot of these light tractor mowers, and also supplied parts. So if you were capable of building your own, to build your own, and he would give you the instructions how to build them, and supply the chains and sprockets to make your own machine if you were so minded. It's a Morris Bow-Nose Cowley engine, the Hotchkiss engine, and the whole thing works a treat, as you can see. Tom Heel that made these was a local farmer, didn't like horses too much, and he was a sort of self-taught engineer come mechanic. Another creation which Tom Heel had some involvement in was this Morris belonging to Pete Brakes. He's the chairman of the Sedgemoor Club. As you see, the drive is now being sort of mounted higher. The axle has been brought up high on the machine with an introduction of a box picking up the drive from the gearbox. Again, Morris with a Bamford mower underneath, and as you can see, it's a lot shorter than Tom Heel's demonstration machine, and the shorter, of course, the more manoeuvrable it is in the fields. Right, when we're in the haymaking field, when we first drive round with the mowing machine, the swath board, as we call it, parts the grass from the uncut grass each time, which allows the heel of the mower to keep clear and doesn't clog up. But when you've done a few rounds, you've got to go back the opposite way to cut the grass nearer the hedge, because the tractor obviously can't get in right into the hedge. So it was always the land girl's job, or the wife or the boy, to do what we called raking back, and that is to part the grass from the uncut so the mower can eventually go back round and do 2 rounds the opposite direction. So this is what we used to have to do as a kid, is what we call raking back. That was my job as a boy, doing the raking back, and most of the mowers at that time, the grass mowers, were 4'6" cut, so you allowed 2 rounds back round the opposite direction, because the hay turners at the time had turned 2 swaths, so you had to cut back 2 rounds. Our little Alice Chalmers Model B, towing a Massey Harris Dickey side rake, very similar to what would have been a horse-drawn one, but you'll see that because it hasn't got an operator on the back of the machine, having done away with the horse, the Massey Harris put a concrete block on the back to take the place of the rider, to give a bit more weight on the drive wheels. A later addition, of course, would be the Viking Lely. This is Francis Chilcott with his T20 Ferguson, and these machines were brought out in the very early 50s, made by Blanche in Wiltshire, Blanche Lely, later to become the Viking Lely. The very early Blanche Lely had solid tin centres on the fans. Before that, I think some of them were actually a canvas centre. This is the trailed Viking Lely. Very good machine. You could alter the circular fans to another part of the frame to allow turning 2 swaths after the hay has been dried, after the mower is cut. That's now in its what we call side rake mode, where you put 2 swaths into one, ready for picking up of the hay. And of course you could also, after you finish haymaking in the field, you could clean rake the field, doing away with the old trip rake that we used to use, horse rake or tractor rake. So it was a good machine, very light to pull around, did an excellent job. This is our E27N Major with a P6 engine, tedding out the hay there. Pete Brakes using our Nicholson hay tedder, also known as a hay kicker, because of the action of the tines flicking up the hay to get the air under it and help dry the crop. And it loosened it up, fluffed it up, and aided the drying in the process of getting the hay dry enough to pick up later in the day. And this is Dave Gooding, a local farmer, brought along his own Oliver 80, and this is the next step on from the tedder. Bamford came out with the Bamford Wuffler, similar to the hay tedder but PTO driven. You could adjust the doors at the back to widen or narrow in the wall of hay. Dave's actually running this now through the wall of hay, but also you could run it through the hay swaths. The problem being that it was a bit time consuming because it would only do 1 swath at a time. Not so bad once 2 swaths are put into one, as you can see here. Later various other makes came out with one that would do 2 swaths at a time, and of course made the job a whole lot quicker. Nice Oliver 80 Lease Len tractor came over during the war years, restored by Dave. Very much the old school David, knows what's to be done, can remember doing this as a younger man, and he didn't have to be told what to do, he knew what was needed. P6 Major now coupled up to a locally made harvest wagon made by Cummins of Bridgewater. It's had a conversion where they've taken the wooden wheels away, leaving the wooden hubs, but local blacksmith or carpenter has cut the spokes on the old wagon wheels and introduced rubber tyres for the tractor age. Behind that we've got the Bamford hay loader. That particular model is about 1938. Picked up the loose hay from the wall of hay. The hay you can see falling off is a little bit on the short side. It has been worked for the demonstration of the show many times, so it's broken the hay up a little bit. Hard work keeping up with one of those hay loaders. A wagon slightly larger than the one you see there would need possibly 2 men on to put up a good load of hay. Good loads they were, went well above the hay lathes that you can see there. And I can remember my father saying, keep the sides out, the middle will fill itself. Same wagon again, pulled by our orange Fordson N. And this is a McCormick International hay loader I restored a few years ago. Bit concerned whether it would actually work, and sure enough it worked very well. Totally different method of picking up the hay to the Bamford that you saw earlier. Picks it up and then rolls it up round and drops it onto wooden slats, and so thin ropes under the slats to stop it from dropping through. And that machine sort of is getting on for 100 years old, and I can remember sort of finding a photograph of one in a scrapbook that I had done when I was about 9 years old, and the write-up then said it was nearly 50 years old, and that was in 1955. So when I stumbled on this machine, it was in a very poor state, but I thought we would restore it, and it worked very well. Daniel Ball there struggling to keep up with the loose hay coming up. You can see he had no time to rest and have a blow. Good friend of ours, Brian Garnham, using his own Fordson N powered with a diesel engine. It's got the Ford 4-cylinder 4D engine in that, similar to using the diesel majors. And he's got our hay sweep on the front, sweeping in loose hay to an elevator to make ricks in the field, and also could be done as we were demonstrating here, sweeping it to an elevator, the elevator then taking the hay into a stationary baler and baling it up for onward shipment to the farm. Also the load of loose hay there waiting to be pitched into the elevator to be baled. That Jones Panther stationary baler has its own knotters. Most stationary balers were tied by hand, but Jones built this machine to go behind the thrashing machine or stationary baling in the field, but it had its own knotters and string tied. Driven there by a Case D, local Somerset tractor, totally unrestored, in its original working clothes, came from a local farm back in the 80s. And this is the top of the range, as you might say, of the Jones balers range. This is the Jones Invicta, very expensive machine in its day. It was £1,600 in the very early 50s. It was the world's first self-propelled baler. It could bale from the field, hay, bale straw behind the combine, could be used as a stationary baler, baling ricks of hay or straw. Jones also made the point that it could be used belted to a thrashing machine to drive the thrashing machine with the flywheel from the opposite side of the machine, as you see, and it would power the thrashing machine whilst baling the straw from the thrasher. Quite an expensive machine in its day. Right, we have our David Brown 30D diesel pulling a International McCormick Deering 50T baler. As you will see, it's a three-wheeled baler. It was an optional extra, but there seemed to be more three-wheel ones around than there was the two-wheeled with the fixed drawbar. Not very good on hill ground because it would jackknife round and push the tractor down over the hill. The baler itself is powered by a little Farmall Cub engine. The earlier models of these balers had a little Continental engine on them, and they were American built. The hay is a little bit on the short side, so our good friend there just helping it into the pickup reel. The chaff dust screen on the front of the engine is doing its job. It's covered in dust, as you can see from the hay, so the hay is well dry. We've got the stand-on bale sledge where you stack the bales on in 6s or 7s and then tip them off so they can later be picked up with a Perry loader. Terry there just going to tip the bales. Terry, you shouldn't step on the tilt board while you're tipping the bales. You'll know next time. E27 MP6 now coupled up to the New Holland 76. The 76 model was the first baler that New Holland made. As you can see, it's a bit unusual. It's got a left-hand pickup, and I can remember as a kid that when the contractors came round with these balers, you had to dig the gate post out because they were 10 foot 2, and the gateways were usually 10 foot. And they had a seat on the side for an attendant to sit on to keep an eye on the knotters, and if you're quite quick you could, if you had a knotter mistie, while the bale is still under compression, you could still tie that bale manually rather than it break up when it comes out the bale chamber. An American farmer came up with this idea, and New Holland picked it up and turned it into their first model baler. But it was farmer designed and made the prototype, which worked quite well, and New Holland were quick to take it up and put it into good operation. Got the nodding head there, which presses the hay down into the bale chamber. The baler's powered with a Wisconsin 22 horsepower petrol engine. That particular one's got the TVO conversion on, so it runs on TVO, paraffin. There you see the seat for the attendant to sit on, and a bale sledge on behind at this particular time, and that's a diamond bale sledge where it puts the bales on edge, and eventually 10 bales would form a pyramid, and it keeps them up off the ground somewhat, keeps them off the damp ground. They were made locally at Dundry on the outskirts of Bristol, and they were known as the Diamond Bale Sledge. Right, another local tractor, a Somerset tractor, is the John Deere AN, Petra TVO, coupled up to the Salopian baler. Salopian made in Prees in Shropshire. They started out as the Salopian Drinking Bowl Company and went from strength to strength, and in 1932 built the biggest cow house in Europe, housing, tying up 288 cattle, and they were quite strong in the dairying equipment, and went on to make a vast range of farm machinery, elevators, haymaking machinery, trailers, and the Salopian baler here. A lot of resemblances to the New Holland 76 that you saw just now, and a lot of the knotter parts are very, very similar to the New Holland knotters, and the mechanism itself. And occasionally you'll see just there the nodder staying up and a bit of a bang. That's an unusual way that ties the bale, whereby there's a latch goes in, holds the ram against the hay while the needles go through and tie, and you've got a telescopic ram from the gears to the ram. The ramrod snaps away from a spring catch while the ram is being held against the hay, and there's one revolution of the gear wheels and picks up on the latch and carries on again. That particular model baler was about 1954. There you see a Massey Ferguson with a loader on it, and it has got the Perry loader on the front, and that bit of extra equipment added to the loader would allow you to pick up the bales, the 6 or 7 bales that are left in a stack in the field once having been sent off the bale sledge. Good old company name, Lister Bale Loader. Hundreds of thousands of these must have been built back in the sort of 50s and 60s. Nearly every farm had one to pick the bales up from the field and put onto the trailer, and then used in the stack yard for taking bales from the trailer and putting them up on the rick. Adjustable front and rear for height, a little Villiers engine to drive it. And this is Teagle bale loader, another sort of bright idea at the time. It a quick release coupling on the side of the trailer, and it's land driven, and takes the bales up, turns them at the top, drops them into a trailer. Famous name of Lister, and that particular engine on that machine is a Lister G2 petrol, and the machine is a Rapier muck grab. Rapier made 2 different sizes, a 2-wheeled one, PTO driven from the tractor. This was the larger one for perhaps a big farm estate, for handling large amounts of manure, and there would be an operator sitting on top working the various levers and clutches driven by that Lister engine, and working that grab that you see, and that would grab up quite a sizable amount of manure from a big heap, dropping into a horse-drawn cart or tractor-drawn cart. Right, we're now on manure hauling. Customary way of doing manure out in the field years ago was either horse-drawn or tractor putt, put it out into small heaps, less than a sort of wheelbarrow full really, 7 paces apart, all the way across the field, done in straight lines, and was turned, spread by hand with pitchforks. As time moved on, they introduced a spreader. Danny dashing out the way of the manure. This is a wild thwaites trailed spreader that would spread the heaps of manure rather than having to spread them by hand. So I can remember from my father thinking it was double handling of the manure, and he bought a manure spreader with the same sort of equipment on the back, but you loaded the manure into the spreader and then took it out to the field and spread it in one go. You had to decide which way the wind was blowing when using something like that, otherwise the wind would bring the manure back on the driver, and a Hessian sack bag put over the head and shoulders very often was the equipment to keep the manure from splattering your shirt or coat. Massey Harris 101 Junior, 4-cylinder petrol TVO engine. My son Ross there at the helm, towing a Albion 5A PTO driven binder. Nice crop of long straw ready to be put through the reed comber, and then would go on to be used for thatching of houses. Not a wisp of wind. Look, that corn is just standing there motionless. A lovely crop. It's a bearded wheat variety. It's called Triticale, and is very strong. Stands up to adverse weather. If it's getting near cutting time and we get a bit of wind and rain, it will withstand quite a bit of bad weather, and is very popular with the thatchers for thatching of houses. Right, this is what they call a rick stand. For those of you that aren't familiar with these setups, if you see the mushroom stones in people's gardens, they are to create a rick stand similar to this. This is a later edition where it's all steel, but years ago they used the staddle stones, they were known as, to put timbers across and build the ricks on to keep the vermin from getting into the rick. Load of corn there on the trailer, just being backed up to the reed comber. My son Ross decided to use one of the heaviest, hardest tractors to steer backing back a four-wheel trailer. That's one of our LSAs. We have 2 LSAs in the collection. Big old powerful tractor. And the Case LA still in its working clothes, powering the Thrasher reed comber. Just easing up the hand clutch there, just to start driving the thrashing machine. Nice steady introduction of the clutch is the way to go. A bit too quick on the clutch and it'll throw the belt off. So just easing it up nice and steady until we get it up to speed. Normally we'd have 2 on the thrashing machine, 1 cutting the string bonds and 1 feeding, but my son Ross is cutting and feeding there just for demonstration purposes. The comber on top of the thrasher is to comb the long straw and clean it all and straighten it for thatching purposes, where it then gets delivered down into the Hornsby trusser and it's tied into a 2-string bundle ready for the thatcher. Arthur there just having a pair of shears, just clipping the ends to tidy up the straggly bits, and then a couple of bumps on the board just to keep all the butts true, and then that's ready for the thatcher to take away. Ransom's thrasher now without the recombber equipment, delivering the straw into a Ransom's baler. Paul there doing the business of putting the needles in and putting the wires through. Normally this would be a two-man job, one man either side. One would thread the wire through from this side, the other guy would then take the wire and feed it back through the previous needle. Paul has just forgotten to pull the trip lever. There he goes. When the needles pass by, they lift that lever, which drops the straw rakers down and stops any more straw from coming down into the bale chamber until you've got the needle in through, and then you trip it again. So the needle's just gone in now. Just wait for some more straw to come on behind the needle to hold it in position. Pull the one out, ready for the next time. And then it's a case of feed the wires through, loop on one end, and feed it back through, and just twist the wires together. We decided to do the setup with two tractors, one driving the thrashing machine. Fordson Major just out of sight there driving the thrashing machine, the Fordson Standard, a longer belt driving the stationary baler, and we did that just to demonstrate that until the big lease Len tractors came over during the war years, one tractor such as a Fordson, that sort of capacity, wouldn't drive thrasher and baler to capacity all day long. So it was one tractor drives the baler, the other drives the thrashing machine. But when the big American tractors came over, the belt was taken from the thrashing machine to the baler, and then one tractor would drive the whole lot. But you were looking for 50 horsepower to work a machine like that, to keep it going to capacity all day long. Big old bales, wire tied. This is our little Opperman. Opperman made the three-wheel motor carts, made the Opperman wheel strakes and various other things. And this was like a little crofter's baler where you could bale on a small farm hay or straw. Wire tied, but instead of having needles, you had a divider board that you had to place on the top of the ram at a particular time when the nodder is up. And I always associate this machine with Arkwright's till in open all hours, because you had to bide your time to get that divider board in. Recomber now, as you see, the straw that isn't good enough to go into the trusser for thatching is coming out on the straw walkers, up the elevator, baling it with an engine-driven New Holland 80. This is a slightly later addition of the New Holland range. The New Holland 80 was a contractor's baler, and it was tied with wire, but automatically tied with wire. It had wire reels instead of string, and it had a mechanism where it twists the wire 13 times, and it was automatic wire tying. 30 horsepower Wisconsin engine there, big old baler, and contractor's tool at the time. And now we've introduced the Jones Star, PTO driven, as the later balers were, driven off the farm 35X. By that time the Jones introduced this baler, then the company was owned by Alice Chalmers. Alice Chalmers took over in 1962, and they made that baler either in orange or red, depending how sort of the farmer was either a Jones man or an Alice Chalmers man. But basically the same baler, different colour. Tied with sisal string. back of the reed comber, the thrasher. You can see the corn being delivered into the bags. Bit of a windy day, one or two of the sheaves blowing off the top of the machine there. Just here the John Deere G there, just ticking over, driving the comber. Danny there feeding the straw in between the belts of the comber. The other guy there cutting the strings, ready to be drawn into the mouth of the feeder. And you've got to ease it in nicely between the belts. And then the straw is combed out the other end. Normally that would be almost a continuous mat of straw coming down there. When you've got a day's work to do, then that would be a continuous flow down that board. And a good day's work would be about 1,800 bundles out of the trusser of thatching reed, and that would be a fair day's work. Simon Glowett there, he's a local thatcher, young man thatching around the Somerset area. Came along and joined him, brought his demonstration frame, as you will see in a moment, just showing the art of thatching. Quite fascinating to watch. Quite a long period of training, I think, to be a qualified thatcher. So Simon there applying his trade of thatching. Just a little frame that he brings around with him to demonstrate the art of thatching. Growing long straw for the thatching industry is very labour intensive. Right from the minute that you plant the seed to keeping it clean of weed and grass, and looking after all through the season, to cutting it and stooking it, drying it, hauling it in, and then combing it. Always need plenty of labour to carry out this process. This is an unusual machine. It's the International 36 stationary thrasher. Some of you will recognise that parts of it look a bit like a combine, and in actual fact the main structure of it is a international trailed combine. But International Harvester Great Britain came up with the answer of the War Agricultural Committee getting around to small farms to thrash small acreages during the war years. And these machines were only available to the war ag. They weren't available for farmers to buy. So hence not many have survived, and we thought this was possibly the only one, but I've recently learned there is another one up in Cumbria and restored, and it's quite nice to know there's one or two have survived. Little small machine, could be, as they say in the write-up, be taken from farm to farm with a small tractor and driven by the tractor to do small acreages. Wolseley sack elevator could also be used for bales, and Wolseley were well known for making stationary engines. That is a Wolseley engine powering it. The elevator itself made by Wolseley, and our light traction trailer there with a load of sacks on, and you'll see a well-known name in this area was the West of England Sack Company. The JF, what we call the wraparound combine. The combine had to be slotted around a tractor. The tractor became the motive power, and of course once the harvesting is over, you could just take the tractor out of the combine, put the combine and leave it in the shed. Quite a number of these sold down in the southwest of England. We wanted a reasonable sized tractor to drive it. The Nuffield, although we have used it with that tractor, would struggle a little bit. It's a 10-foot cut, although the JF did do a narrower cut of some were 8 foot and some were less than that. Right, our little Nuffield Universal 3 with a little bit of a crane jib attached to the mill loader, lifting timbers now for Arthur, who happens to own this rack bench. Just rolling himself a cigarette there while he's got a break in activities. Obviously the rack bench was a method of sawing tree trunks into usable planks and timbers, and reigned supreme for many years until they introduced the band saw. One of the drawbacks with the rack bench, as you see here, is the circular saw blade would take quite a width of cut, so losing quite a bit of usable material when timber was short and valuable, then it was a case of make the most of it. And the bandsaw, once it was introduced, was a lot narrower cut, so obviously you could get more timber, more boards for your money. But a lot of the farm estates had these rack benches driven by a steam engine, or later years a tractor, providing the tractor was big enough. It takes a fair bit of horsepower to drive these benches. They certainly make a steam engine work hard, and also most tractors of the era. Arthur has brought along his American Massey Ferguson 97, which is very similar to the Minneapolis Moline tractor, but built under license for Massey Ferguson. So 90 odd horsepower would be a good sized tractor to drive the rack bench. Carey there in looking after the side of lifting the trunks onto the bench for Arthur. Getting it lined up now and getting a few wedges in to hold it in position. Good up the revs on the old Massey 97. Also hand clutch on these tractors. Gets the saw blade up to speed. And this bench, as you can see, is hand fed with the wheel there, powering the steel table into the saw. Some of the later benches, such as Stenner and Gunn, had automatic feed, where they had various different size pulleys with flat belt drive, which could be, you could select the speed that you wanted to power the table into the saw. But this is hand fed, so the operator can just feel and listen to the saw and get a feel for it as to what would be the right speed to feed it in. Too much pressure into the saw would throw the belt off, and then you've got to stop and put the belt back on again and go on again. So a nice steady feed into the saw. Another view of the 97 there, just looking down the line of the belt. when these machines were made, health and safety hadn't been invented in those days. So there's a nice selection of sawn timber there. Another operation which is a bit labour intensive to handle the tree trunks and then stack the boards back after. So once you've sawn tree trunks out for the boards, then obviously there's quite a bit of offcuts from the tree trunk, and then it's the job of the smaller circular saw bench driven by a little T20 Ferguson there to saw the wood into sizable pieces for the fire for the winter. You've got the Massey Ferguson 4-cylinder 35 there with a Corwood saw bench, known as the Ferguson saw bench. Slightly safer bit of equipment to use because you had a spring table and it just made life a bit easier and a bit safer than the bench that you saw a few moments ago. But purely for sawing firewood really, whereas the other bench you could saw out small amounts of timber into usable timbers around the farm, but this is purely a firewood bench really. Right, there's our big old Alice A there, coupled to a power takeoff driven trailed winch. It's a Fishley trailed winch made down in Devon, and this is pulling in a mole plough which is used to drain the ground, and this particular mole plough is a John Deere. I think it's a John Deere Kiefer, if that's the way to pronounce it. It's got to be winched across the field. And the previous owner that had this pulled in many miles of polythene water piping for farmers to get water to their drinking troughs out in the field. And that's a similar machine, but it's a Ransom's mole plough, but it's minus the actual mole that goes behind the bullet there. That had got lost, so it's just pulling the actual bullet piece through. There should be a mole on the back of that, which is bigger diameter. We're just doing a test pull with that. Bit of a hard old machine to pull that one, so we've had to put a snatch block on the mole plough. The David Brown Thrashing there is anchor tractor, and the Fordson Standard with a Automower winch is doing the actual winching. The Automower winch was made in Norton St Philip near Bath, and was a very good heavy timber winch for the tractors of the day. It's got the cast iron piece on the front and the bars to protect the radiator from falling trees or whatever, and you could also stick some extra ballast in that casting to keep the front down. And Danny's just tripped the mole plough, and the wheels then power up and pull the mole out of the ground. We've got the Ransom's mole plough coupled up to a county crawler with a 6-cylinder trader engine in it. As you see there, he was struggling just to get it away. He dropped the plough just in over the ditch bank, and of course you've got lots of roots and bits in the ground in the hedge line, and you can see the old county there beginning to spin the tracks. No lack of power with the 6-cylinder Thames trader engine in it. And once he's got it through the roots and the debris at the side of the ditch, then he's been able to go up a gear. Oliver Emery there, the owner of the machine. And of course it's a one-man operation, because with the pull of a rope he can trip the mechanism on the mole plough and get the mole out of the ground. Oliver came quite early in the morning to try that out and asked why. He was there before we sort of officially opened. He said he didn't want to make a fool of himself not being able to pull that mole plough direct as he's doing now, so he wanted to make sure he could do it before the people came, and not to make a fool of himself, as he put it. So he kept going all day long, and did an excellent job of draining the plough field there. Leaves a nice channel underground, so if we get a lot of rain, then the water will trickle along that mole-made channel to the ditch, and keeps the field from flooding when the corn's planted. You will see there, as he approaches the hedge, he can pull the rope and pull the mole up out of the ground, ready for the next run. There we go, and up it comes. You can see just the mole hanging on the back of the blade there now. So Oliver turns the outfit round, back across the field for another pull across. Different method now of land drainage. It's cutting a trench to put the land drain pipes in. This is a wartime Fordson with a Henderson trencher made in steps in Glasgow, and quite an unusual bit of equipment. That it's the digger part is not actually driven by anything, but sort of pushed around with the levers, as you will see. And we're down sort of nearly getting on for 2 feet, and you can just see how dry that clay soil is through the dry summer we've had, and it's really sort of making the old tractor and trencher work quite hard to dig that in hard conditions. Normally it would have been done a different time of the year, when the ground was a bit softer, and go down the depth of some 27 inches. I just think it's a fascinating machine to watch. Whereas that pushes the blade round, the latch there goes over, the next spade pushes it round, another bit pushes the mud or the dirt off the blade. As each one comes up, swipes the dirt off, which normally would be damp clay. The old governors on the tractor are a little bit worn, and his job to keep the revs down. You see the winch there is worked also from the whole mechanism, and there's like a pawl and ratchet that pulls the tractor very slowly towards an anchor point, such as another tractor. Right, another local man here, Colin Waite from Phelan near Bristol, with his Ransom's portable engine, and Colin is doing what we commonly know as the roundabout ploughing. Again, labour intensive, but something that was around in the 1860s, 1870s. You see a 2-drum winch there powered by the steamer, a series of ropes and snatch blocks and cable carriers, and that pulls a 2-furrow walk behind plough across the field. As the plough comes to the end of its run across the field, there'll be a man stood either end of the field actually with a rope, and he will pull the rope, indicating the winch operator to stop the pull on the winch. So you'll see there's a little bell on the winch, and the guy at the end of the run will pull his rope, rings the bell. Colin will then stop the winch from pulling the plough any further. Of course, you've got a guy at the other end of the field also with a rope all the way up to the winch to ring the bell when it gets to the other end of the field. That's the bell ringer there, and the belt then is put over onto the loose pulley. There's the little bell that indicates the winch operator to cease the run, the pull. So tip the plough over, reversible plough, 2 furrow, and now we introduce the other winch drum now, which will power the cable right across the field, right round the snatch blocks to the right at the other end of the field to pull the plough on the run away from the winch down to the hedge line. And then every so often you've got to move all the equipment along as the plough ploughs the field, turns it over. Then you have to keep moving the anchor point, so quite labour intensive. Colin did a marvellous job there of creating. He didn't have all the bits just to sort of go to work with that. There's the bell operator there, or the hat, just about to pull the rope to ring the bell. Trying to keep it all nice and authentic, we took the coal down to Colin's portable in the old horse-drawn putt, the old dung cart, and rather than have any modern machinery around. And also we took water down there in the old-fashioned, there's 2 17-gallon churns, tapered churns there, and 2 12-gallon ones there. They supplied the water to the barrel to the steamer. Here's our old mate Francis. You saw him earlier on turning hay for us. He's now very keen on his ploughing and done quite a bit of match ploughing. And he's got his little 2-furrow plough on the back of his little T20 Ferguson, ploughing our 2.5 acre field that we just keep for the show. We grow a bit of corn to work the thrashers and the reed comber. Another friend of ours, Steve Cox, is driving our Caterpillar R2. That's the petrol TVO version of the D2, which is probably a more popular tractor. The R2, as I said, was petrol TVO, but in its original working clothes, runs a treat, never misses a beat. Steve's pulling a set of Denning of charred Somerset disc harrows, trailed disc harrows. So he's working down the soil. You can see it's fairly heavy clay soil around our area. Got a big wide turn to be able to turn it around for the next run. And there goes Steve disappearing into the sunset, as we say. Well, that's it for this year, ladies and gents. I hope you've enjoyed it. We enjoyed putting on the show for you, and also the public that come and visit us. A lot of hard work, but if you've enjoyed it, then we're happy. And we've now amalgamated with Sedgemoor Vintage Rally, whereby they have their annual rally on a couple of our fields, and then we try and do our hay and harvest working alongside. And we've always got something new to show people. A lot of unusual machinery that we've collected over the years. If you're interested in farm machinery working, it's all done in traditional surroundings, as you have seen, and perhaps you'll come and visit us. We're always looking for good helpers that know the game. If you've enjoyed the second edition of this Hay and Harvest working, perhaps if you haven't already got the first edition, then perhaps you would like to have a look at the first edition also, which is still available. We'll look forward to seeing you another day.